Now for the third one, process is exactly the same. Now there might be some residual, English is hard today, crayon from before, and I bet you if I just sprayed it and stamped it, I probably could get somewhat decent color out of it. But I don't really want to right now experiment with that. But if you've got an extra piece of scrap paper, just try it and see if you've got enough color on there for a second stamping and embossing. And you can see between these, I don't bother cleaning my stamp up. I'll do that at the end when everything is done. But that's not to say that you couldn't if you wanted to. You absolutely could clean your stamp between. And there's some stamps, like this one here, every single time I do it, it kind of pools with water, but it's also a more solid stamp, so there's more surface. Some of these, the water goes into the areas. But because of the type of stamp that we're using, I'm not really minding it if it loses some of its open detail. I think it looks really pretty no matter what. And then the last one, the red. And you can tell that I'm not being super careful with my coloring. I'm just making sure that there's color over the whole thing. Mist lightly and then stamp. There we are. Now I'm going to put some paper down for this one because I don't have a container to pour back in. Well, I have a container to pour back into, but I don't have a container like my clear one. So I'm just going to, this is a really big container too, so I'm just going to pour a ton of the powder out. Tap the excess off. Now, because this one is frosted crystal, the appearance is more of a frosty look. So when you emboss it, it's going to look different than embossing clear powder. We're not looking for that clear shine that we get from embossing clear powder. It's going to have a frosty look, but while you're embossing, it does kind of bubble, so you can tell that it's happening. It does, there is a change, but you just have to notice, or you have to watch it and notice it while it's working. So you can see right here is what's embossed. So the color stays the same. It just gets a little bit more clear. Turn it around so we're embossing away from our hand. There we are. This one is embossed. So my first one is still fairly, it's got some fairly big wet spots. So I'm just going to pause, let this dry completely, and then I'll be back to assemble the card. All right, my first one is dry, so we can continue. And you can actually use your heat tool to speed it up if you want as well. There's nothing wrong with that. It is going to make the paper warp a little bit more, but that's okay. Like we've said before, once we glue it down to our cards, we're never going to know that the paper was warped. I'm going to leave the lid off of that for a moment. All right, I've got it on there. I'm just going to put an acrylic block on there to hold it in place. I've got my sentiments already die cut and glued together exactly the same way as every single previous card here. So There's no surprise there. And not do that part. There we go. I'm actually going to take my little tin. Let that dry for a moment, and all right, I'm back. The end of that sentence was silence my dog. If I forget to close the curtain upstairs, she likes to bark at anything that moves. So hopefully we've got it fixed. All right, once again, just gluing the thanks die cut at the bottom, and again, you could change your sentiment to whatever you want it to be. As well as your stamped image for the technique. This would even be really, really pretty with just like some flower silhouettes, I think. Or as I said before, some winter greenery, I think would be really nice as well. Last one. Put this back over top of that to let that dry. And then once they are dry, very simple but very, very pretty. And I love how the colors all combine together and that every single one is different from the other.